The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Rosewood Cafe, casting golden streaks across the polished wooden floors. Steam rose from coffee cups like tiny ghosts, and the gentle murmur of conversation filled the air with warmth. This was the kind of place where time moved slowly, where people came not just for the excellent coffee, but for a moment of peace in their busy lives. Sarah Martinez had been working at Rosewood for 3 years now. At 28, she moved between tables with practiced grace, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, her smile genuine despite the early hour. She knew most of the regular customers by name, remembered how they liked their coffee, and always had a kind word ready. The cafe was more than a job to her. It was a sanctuary where she could save money for nursing school while helping create small moments of joy for others. The morning rush was in full swing when the black sedan pulled up outside. Sarah noticed it through the window as she cleared table 7. The car was sleek and expensive, the kind that cost more than most people made in a year. She watched as a man in a perfectly tailored suit stepped out, his movements sharp and impatient. Even from a distance, she could sense the tension radiating. From him, like heat from pavement in summer, Richard Blackstone was having the worst week of his life, though most people would struggle to understand why. As the founder and CEO of Blackstone Industries, he had everything money could buy. His penthouse apartment overlooked the city like a modern castle. His company's stock price made headlines. His name appeared on the covers of business magazines. But this morning, none of that mattered. The hostile takeover attempt had blindsided him. For 3 sleepless nights, he'd fought to save the company he'd built from nothing, the company that bore his name and represented 20 years of his life. The lawyers had delivered the final blow just an hour ago. He was losing everything. The vultures would pick apart his life's work, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The cafe door chimed softly as Richard entered, but the sound felt harsh in his ears. Everything felt harsh now. The cheerful yellow walls seemed to mock him. The laughter from a corner table grated against his nerves. He found an empty table by the window and sat down heavily. His phone already buzzing with calls he didn't want to answer. Sarah approached with her usual warm smile, carrying a steaming pot of coffee. "Good morning. Welcome to Rosewood. Can I start you off with some coffee while you look at the menu?" Richard barely glanced up from his phone. "Just coffee, black, and make it quick." Sarah's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her professional composure. She poured the coffee carefully, the rich aroma filling the space between them. "Our special today is—" "I said just coffee," Richard snapped, his voice cutting through her words like a blade. His phone rang again, and he answered it immediately. "What do you mean the board voted? I thought we had until Friday." Sarah stepped back, giving him space, but she could see other customers beginning to notice the tension. She busied herself with nearby tables, hoping his call would end soon and the cafe could return to its peaceful rhythm. But the call only made Richard angrier. His voice rose with each passing minute. 30 years of loyalty means nothing to them, he barked into the phone. "They're throwing me away like garbage." When Sarah returned with a water glass, hoping to calm the situation, Richard was already at his breaking point. The final piece of bad news had just hit him. His business partner, his oldest friend, had voted against him. "Excuse me, sir," Sarah said gently. "I don't mean to interrupt, but there are families with children here," and Richard exploded. He slammed his phone down so hard the coffee cup jumped in its saucer. "Are you kidding me right now?" His voice boomed across the cafe, silencing every conversation. "Do you have any idea who I am? Do you know what I'm dealing with today?" Sarah's face flushed, but she kept her voice steady. "Sir, I understand you're upset, but you understand nothing." Richard shot to his feet, towering over her. "I'm worth more money than you'll see in 10 lifetimes. I could buy this pathetic little cafe and tear it down before lunch. And you're worried about noise. The entire cafe had gone silent now. Parents instinctively moved closer to their children. The elderly couple at table 3 looked frightened. Even the barista behind the counter had stopped what he was doing to stare. Sarah stood perfectly still, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice remained calm. The fluorescent light caught the small silver cross at her throat as she took a deep breath. When she spoke, her words were quiet, but in the absolute silence of the cafe, everyone heard them clearly. "You're right, sir. You could probably buy this place and tear it down, but you can't buy back the respect you just lost. And you can't tear down the example you just set for that little girl over there, who's been watching you this whole time." Richard followed her gaze to a corner table where a young girl, maybe 7 years old, sat with her grandmother. The child's eyes were wide with confusion and fear. She had been coloring in a princess coloring book, but now her crayons lay forgotten. As she stared at the angry man who had made everyone in her safe place afraid, something shifted in Richard's chest. The rage that had been consuming him for days suddenly felt hollow and cold. He looked around the cafe and saw what his anger had created. A room full of people who had been enjoying their morning until he had stolen that from them. A young mother clutching her toddler closer. An old man gripping his coffee cup with white knuckles. A teenage couple who had been laughing together just moments before. Sarah's voice was still gentle when she continued, "Everyone in this room is fighting battles you know nothing about. Mrs. Chen over there just finished her last round of chemotherapy. The young man by the door has been unemployed for 6 months, but still comes in once a week because this place makes him feel less alone. That grandmother is raising her granddaughter because her son was deployed overseas." Richard's throat felt tight. He had been so consumed by his own crisis that he had forgotten the most basic truth, that everyone around him was human, with their own struggles and dreams and fears. "I don't know what's wrong in your life today," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper now, "but hurting other people won't fix it. It will only make the world a little bit darker for everyone." The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Richard could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the weight of every pair of eyes in the room. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "You're right." The words came out cracked and raw. I'm sorry. To all of you. I'm sorry." He pulled out his wallet, but his hands were shaking as he placed a $100 bill on the table. "For her college fund," he said quietly to Sarah, nodding toward the little girl in the corner, "and for reminding me that being wealthy doesn't give me the right to be cruel." As Richard walked toward the door, the little girl's voice stopped. "Mister, are you okay?" He turned back, and for the first time in days, his expression softened completely. "I'm going to be, sweetheart. Thank you for asking." After he left, the cafe slowly came back to life, but something had changed. Conversations were a little kinder. Strangers made eye contact and smiled. The elderly couple invited the lonely teenager to join them for coffee. The cafe had become more than just a place to get breakfast. It had become a reminder that kindness was always a choice, and that choice mattered more than any amount of money. Sarah found the little girl's grandmother at closing time. Mrs. Patterson pressed a folded piece of paper into Sarah's hand. It was a drawing the little girl had made. It showed Sarah with angel wings, standing in front of the cafe with the words "Thank you for being brave" written in purple crayon at the bottom. Sometimes, Sarah thought as she locked up that evening, the smallest acts of courage create the biggest changes. And sometimes, one sentence spoken with kindness can change, not just a moment but a life.